We'll call the subcommittee back to order, and thank you for your patience while we conducted our votes. We've heard from all four witnesses, and now we'll proceed with some questions. Well, let's see, Ms. Gilligan, you've been here before. As you cited, today you said you made apologies for not having some of this done and trying to get things done. April 14th, 2011, you testified before us, Congress, the Transportation Committee. I know FAA has not acted on these directions as quickly or as comprehensively as this committee intended. So was yesterday Groundhog Day?
Yes.
Yeah, so we keep hearing the same thing over and over. Did you want to respond?
Well, Mr. Micah, as I noted in my testimony this morning, we do understand that you are very frustrated with this. Having said that, as I also testified, there are tremendous challenges in moving this forward, not the least of which is the amount of costs that it's likely to drive. And that's why we're going to try to work with TSA and quite honestly now with Ms. Carroll's organization.
With Ms. Carroll's organization, Ms. Carroll, don't you have examples where this can be done fairly cost effectively? Most of these pilot's license only cost, the cost is minimal. I know Disney can't be paying a fortune for their card.
Well, it depends. I mean,
how much would a card be?
a card. So we
Yeah,
just
a range.
okay. Depending on what kind of electronics are in there, what kind of security features.
Well, again, I want to know who has the card and who's getting the access, and we don't know that now.
Who get with the give?
Who is in possession of the card and who's gaining the access? Who are we identifying who the person is? And do we have that information embedded in the card?
For certain programs, yes, sir, we do.
I mean, they already have that. And you already produce some of that, don't you?
We do. We make the U.S. green card, sir.
Does that have a fingerprint?
It does not have the fingerprint.
It doesn't? Well, it sure as hell should. That's another waste of money. And we sat with these people after 9/11, State Department and others. They're all producing garbage IDs. I don't want to.
No, go.
I mean, I'm going to put Ms. Duckworth on staff. She has a 1904 pilot's license. 1904 pilot's license. She pulled up. It has a picture. It has the name. It has a signature. It has a physical description out here. It's not embedded. And then it has the fingerprints. 1904. Here's Amelia Earhart's picture, all identifying information, and we're pretty sure on the other side is fingerprints. And here we are in 2016, 15 years after 9/11. We don't know who's going in and who's coming out. There's no way to ensure it. The TWIC card, we should do another hearing on that. Transportation worker identification. They spent $500 million, 500 million total. It's just incredible. Now they have to come with a driver's license. They have a card, but it doesn't have a reader. We still don't have a reader, do we, at the ports to read them? Does anyone know? DHS, no.
Not as of yet.
Not as of yet, so. 15 years. And Mickey Mouse, or at least I call the FAA card Mickey Mouse, but the Minnie Mouse one, we know who it is. You spoke a little bit about identity management systems, okay, but they're in very few airports or many airports. What's the status?
There are 21 airports, Boston, Logan.
Out of 450.
Yeah, 21 out of 450, right.
Are they all the largest category and the largest category?
BFW, CTAC.
Pretty much.
Yeah, pretty much the bigger ones, yes, sir.
But they're not everywhere.
No, sir.
That's troubling even when you have the systems. And that's interesting that the systems also can identify erratic
Yes, sir. It can detect anomalies and patterns of access and where people go, and it automatically alerts security if there is an anomaly. So, for
But there's
example,
no requirement, and they have voluntarily put them in place.
yes, sir.
But again, we've seen that these folks target our soft areas. So you have 21, so we have another 430 locations that you can, you don't have that in place. IRIS, where are we on IRIS, Ms. Gilligan?
Well, sir, I think, as you know, the National Institute for Standards and Technology did issue a standard for the
Right.
collection of iris.
But you said there was no GSA.
Right. At this point, one of the requirements in the statute was that the system be linked to PIV requirements. And GSA is apparently...
Information, what's PIV requirements?
Ms. Carroll used it earlier, sir. I don't know what it stands for.
So I'm not a real technology expert. I'm more of a policy person, but the PIV card is a credential that follows a standard developed by NIST. It's a FIPS 201 standard. And so it was developed for all federal employees.
Right.
So that they have...
So that's the standard.
That's the
Right.
standard, right.
But we don't have that in
But
place.
there are no systems, to your earlier point, there are not yet any approved vendors of systems to be able to read and take advantage of the
But you've
iris
developed,
biometric.
I didn't mean to interrupt, but I do. Actually, I'm from New York originally. This is interesting, guys. Listen, I read these old books. I collect old books, usually before 1800, printed in America. And they are little capsules of time and space. Somebody wrote them, what they observed at that time and space. This doesn't count against my time. Turn it off. So I'm reading this book, and this is back in the 1790s, and it's a guy that came from England, and he wrote his memoirs. He says, I'm in New York now visiting. He said, people in New York have a habit of interrupting people when they're talking. And that's over 200 years ago. I do the same thing. It's just, I think it's in the DNA or maybe the water system. Yeah. I'll give you one more quick one, and this is the side since it's a small group. I got another book, a guy visited here in 1828. Listen to this. He came to the House of Representatives from England. He says, I've come to the chamber of the House of Representatives, and he says, it's a strange body that meets there. He says, the members stand up. He says, there's no one in the room. He says, and they give a speech, and a stenographer takes it down, obviously for the consumption of their constituents back home. This is before C-SPAN. This is 1828. Then his other observation is 1828, he says, I'm here in the United States visiting, and he says, 1828 is an election. They elect the chief magistrate of the United States, they used to call him that. He says, and in this year, everything circles around who shall be the next chief elected executive of the United States, and nothing else gets done. Do things change much? But that was a terrible aside, but I thought I could share that with y'all. Get some prerogatives as chairman. But again, not much has changed on this. I don't know what to do. It's troubling too to hear you talked about TSA setting standards for IDs. Who talked about that, Carol? Ms. Carroll?
Yes, sir. The ASAC recommended that the...
But they haven't.
Well, the recommendation just came out.
But they haven't.
Set standards now.
No. How about that? Let's do a letter, too, to, as a result of the hearing staff, I won't dictate it now, we would like you to set standards for this credentialing, but that's not done yet. It just came out.
I mean, the recommendation to set the standards, but, I mean, you know, the FIPS 201 standards, and NIST has done significant work on setting standards for biometrics as well. So, you know.
But it's all out there, but they have to adopt it. And then what was troubling is no full use of all the databases, and I think that's being corrected now. Is that right, LaJoy?
Yes, sir, it is.
And yeah, I don't like to ask this, but you started giving us some numbers, like there's 87,000 with no social security number in the base.
That's correct. Of the 900,000 names that we pulled, there were about 87,000, or about 10%, that
10%.
had no social security number.
And
in
then
the database.
75,000, what was that figure?
The 75,000, if I recall, was no passport number, and then a subset of that had no alien identification number.
So they could technically have people who are aliens working without us knowing about it at airports?
The issue we had with TSA's data set was that there wasn't an ability, any assurance that the data could be used. So when you run it against a terrorist database,
And the 73 that you found, were they airport workers, TSA workers, combination of the above, or people who just got into secure areas?
They would be airport workers that held a secure identification badge, in other words, to be able to go into the secure areas of the airport next to the aircraft, check baggage, that kind of thing.
I don't know why TSA can't contract, it's not that expensive, with someone who can do sort of a nonstop criminal check. Do you know any reason? We can talk to the administrator about that. That's a big gap, too. And the self-reporting, as the IG pointed out, doesn't cut it. They're the last thing they want to do. Do you think that's possible, Mr. LaJoy? I know you don't set policy, but...
Well, Mr. Chairman, it's one of the things that we've recognized along with the ASAC is we are piloting the RAP-BAC program with the FBI that would allow us to get recurrent vetting with criminal records history checks, similar to what we do with TSDB today. So that pilot's going to start in March, and we're hopeful that we can roll it out before the end of the year.
Couple of other quick ones before I yield. The employee assessment is only done every 2 years, is that correct? Or is that just for employment? And then...
Again, that's an interim measure we put in place, until we have...
But you've been hiring people without that employee and putting them to work without that assessment completed, is that not correct?
Well, again, we put out, it was a few months ago, the requirement. We knew we wanted to work with the ASAC to get to the FBI RAP-BAC. But in the meantime, knowing it would take some amount of time, months, better part of a year to get that across the airports, we did require that they go out and conduct criminal history records checks at the renewal point or every 2 years thereafter.
One of my sheriffs called me and said he had fired a couple of deputies for really serious offenses and misconduct. He said the next thing you know, they were over in Daytona Beach as TSA screeners. He asked me what's going on. I couldn't tell him, but as we checked, they hadn't been cleared. They hadn't been properly vetted, but they could get a job. How quickly, Ms. Gilligan, how quickly does FAA revoke a license after disqualifying information is received?
We issue the revocation based on a request by TSA that they've made a determination that someone holds a pilot certificate and is a risk to national security. So as soon as we receive the notification, the process, the action is taken by our counsel's office.
But they could still use that ID with another form of ID, and you'd never know who that person was.
No, when the pilot certificate is revoked, they are required to turn it in, and if they don't, we pursue that. So that we retrieve the pilot certificate when it's been revoked.
I want to give everyone a chance. Ms. Duckworth, we'll go to you. I have more questions, unfortunately. Go ahead, Ms. Duckworth.
I just want to follow up on that, Ms. Gilligan. When you said the pilot certificate is revoked, you retrieved it, what about when it's changed or they get a new certification?
Oh, I'm sorry, I was responding specifically to Mr. Micah's question. We have a process where TSA notifies us if they've determined after someone has gotten a pilot certificate that they now pose a risk to national security, and based on that notification, we revoke that certificate. Separately, anytime a pilot gets a new rating or raises to a new level, they must present themselves to an inspector or to another designated, usually a flight instructor or other designated representative, have their photo ID. Our folks will then confirm that they demonstrate that they've met the requirements to become a commercial pilot, for example, or that they've passed their type rating in a 737, whatever it may be. And that information is transmitted then to the registry and the new certificate is issued.
Right, but you don't recover their old certificate with the old information.
I apologize, ma'am, I actually don't know the answer to that. I thought they give their old certificate, they get their new one.
I have both my old one and my
Okay.
new one.
Then you're right.
Yeah, so something to take a look at. So I'd like to take a look at the credentialing process and effectiveness and security lapses. My whole point today is just to make sure you guys get the resources and the support you need to do what you need to do to keep our people safe. And if there's something that we find out today where you need congressional help, legislative help, you need appropriation, you need something, let us know. And that's really what I'm interested in, to make sure you get the resources to do what you need to do. And so, Mr. Roth, there are many issues to be discussed today, but the central one is this. In 2011, that Inspector General's report concluded that individuals who pose a threat may obtain airport badges and gain access to secured areas. Do you believe that individuals who pose a threat may still be able to obtain airport badges and gain access to secured areas today?
Yes, I do, for a number of reasons. One is, as I highlighted in my testimony, the TSA is a regulator who has to regulate the 450 airports who make the determination with regard to criminal history, for example, can only do a fraction of the regulation that they probably need to do to check on how well the airports are adjudicating some of the criminal history. That would be one thing. The second is that TSA's database is very, very filled with errors, and it's going to be difficult to do any kind of matching between TSA's database and, for example, the criminal history databases or even the terrorist watch list databases. And third, the way the legislation works, it's really a box-checking exercise. You've either been convicted or not convicted of certain offenses. If you have not been convicted of those offenses, you are free to get, and you have the ability to work in the United States, you have unrestricted access to the most secure areas within the airport. It's functionally the same level of security clearance that an individual with pre-check would have. It isn't a holistic, we'll look at this person and determine whether or not he's a threat to aviation security. Rather, if he's convicted of a certain level of crimes, he doesn't get it. Or if he's convicted, he doesn't get it. If he isn't convicted, then he gets it, regardless of what could be in his background.
So what do you think are the most important outstanding recommendations that your office has made to TSA that have yet to be implemented?
We are in the process of, we made 6 recommendations. 2 of those have been closed, one of which was the most serious one in our view, which was the lack of TSA having all the information in the TIDE database. So that's been worked out. There are a number of ones in which they are working towards getting a solution towards it. So we are satisfied that they're making progress in the right direction. The difficulty, as I see it, is that TSA is working in a system where airports have certain authority and TSA has certain authority. And anytime you have a split in authority like that, it's going to be very difficult to ensure that things don't fall through the cracks.
Okay. Mr. LaJoy, do you have any comments to that, or what do you need to help you to be able to meet all 6 of those recommendations?
Well, I think at this point, Ranking Member, to the IG's point, it's just a matter of putting some technical fixes in place with data quality is how I would characterize it. This is an intensely manual process, as you can imagine. And so errors in data, inhibits our ability at times to effectively vet. And so the extent to which we can, incorporate some logic into a system to cut down on data entries. We've gone out and we've changed our national inspection manual for all of our inspectors. When they go to a badging office, look at the original documents. And so there's a number of things we're putting in place. But with respect to the IG's open comments, I think at this point it's just a matter of putting the technical fixes in place.
And do you have a plan for those technical fixes? Do you have the ability, do you have the support you need to put those technical fixes in place? And what is that timeline? You're saying that, the IG is saying you're on your way to meeting those, but on your way could be 6 months or it could be 6 years.
Well, I think we're acting deliberately, sensitive to the fact that there's the cyber issues, that we have to, with respect to privacy. And so I couldn't characterize it as years. I'd characterize it more as months. And again, getting back to our office, I can get you specific timelines on some of them, but I can assure you there is a deliberate plan to close these in short order.
I would love to see, and if it's all right with the chairman, a report back as to the timeline as to when they will be closing all 6 of the recommendations from the IG.
Okay, and we can ask the staff to follow up with the questions. There will be questions submitted, and if we can get a response for the records.
Absolutely.
Without objection, we'll do that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Okay, well, a couple more questions here. There's obviously a huge number of lost or stolen credentials. You found a lot of that, Mr. Roth?
In our earlier audit, we did find a number of essentially lost credentials. We are currently doing an audit of the CITA badge process to see whether or not that has improved. Hopefully, we will have that audit out later this year.
And even if you had the pilot's license, which has no photo on it, has no biometric way to tell that that's the individual, and another form of ID of which might not have any form of biometric, we still don't know who's entering. Is that correct?
My understanding is that the way the CITA badge works in a large majority of the circumstances.
Well, right now I'm talking about the pilot's license.
That I cannot comment on.
It's the fact, Ms. Gilligan. We don't know. We have no way of knowing because we still have this, as I've termed it, Mickey Mouse pilot's license.
But
We have
again-
no biometric. We don't know who those people are. And then if it's a stolen or lost one, we had a hearing some years ago on credentials. I never realized how you can duplicate credentials. And college kids and students are incredible at reproducing these IDs. But we really don't know who that individual is unless there's a biometric.
But at this point, the pilot certificate is not used to gain access in any situation.
I know, it can't be.
So
You can, they
other
can use,
forms
they
of
can
ID
use a driver's license. But the whole purpose was for us to know who's in control of the aircraft, who the pilot is. We have had at least one instance, and we saw the European, sometimes some things happen with people who have taken control of aircraft or gained access with false credentials. Do we know with, and the other thing is vetting people. I think you can screen them through metal detectors, but you need to be reviewing these individuals that are working behind secure area or insecure areas, and we don't do a very good job of that. TSA has failed in vetting some of those folks, right, Mr. Roth?
That's correct.
What worries me
To be
is,
more accurate, it's the airport.
what worries me after this hearing is you've just said we've got thousands of people working there. We don't even know, well, 10% of them we don't have Social Security numbers of. Then we have 75,000 that you mentioned, 14,000 no passports, or they could be aliens. One of my concerns is, and I've seen some of the big airports on the East Coast, Chicago, they do employ a lot of folks from different nationalities, no offense, and they should be able to work. But there are people we don't know about as far as their background, and then we're not vetting them. We don't know about Egypt, what took place there yet, do we, Mr. LaJoy, with that? They thought that the plane that was taken down supposedly by ISIS was an inside airport job. Do we know that?
Well, I think that's probably worth, closed session to discuss any particulars we have on that, but I'm not prepared to comment beyond that, Mr. Chairman.
But a lot of things indicated it was an inside job. And the other thing, too, is everything we've done and with TSA is always a reaction. 9/11, we finally put in some standards. Everybody says private screening failed. It wasn't private screening that was failed. It was the federal government that didn't put any standards in for the screeners. And part of that, the government got lobbied, don't put anything that would cost the airlines another penny. So it was a failure. It was a failure of the government to put in policies for what could not be brought on board. There was no federal prohibition to box cutters. I remember when we looked at it after 9/11, the direction to pilots, and we actually read from the manual for dealing with hijacking, was to land the plane in Havana and contact the Swiss consul there. That was the instructions, to cooperate basically with the hijackers and then land the plane there. That was the government's instructions to the pilots. So the government failed, and the government, to me, is failing to take steps. Everything we've done, the metal detectors, the they saw a flaw in those. So what did we do? Of course, I remember going to Italy where they made most of these. We actually brought the metal detector capability down lower to the floor. But today, most people have to take off their shoes unless you got pre-check or some situation. That's a result of Richard Reed and his going after the diaper bomber, explosives. Now we have the body scanners. It's always a reaction. And here again, I think they can easily determine what our most vulnerable points are. Liquid bombing, a vulnerable point. Now we all have to take our liquids out. So it's always after the fact. Is there any progress you can report? Speaking of liquid bombs, there is equipment that we once purchased and that sat around for a while that could detect liquids that posed a risk. That equipment was dumbed down or not used. Is there any current effort to buy that equipment or deploy that equipment, Mr. LaJoy?
Well, again, there's various pieces of technology with respect to liquids. Some of it we do employ, some of it, we have not yet deployed. We could perhaps give you a full briefing on the various different pieces of technology that are available.
I can
Some
tell
are
the
in existence
committee
today.
and staff, we looked at it. We had a whistleblower. Equipment was sold to them, had that capability. They neither could train their people or operate it. So basically, they disarm the ability of the equipment to detect that. So we can't bring things on to this day. But that equipment is available. Let me look here. Renewal and lost. Okay. I heard that you can you renew your, I want to say license, you keep saying certificate, but can you renew that license by either electronic request or by phone?
The pilot certificate is not renewed. It doesn't need to be renewed. But as Member Duckworth mentioned, most pilots add additional capabilities to their certificate over time. Anytime
So
that
it's
you-
just permanent? It's never, okay. Really?
Well, anytime you're getting, again,
So embedded in it would be only the information about additional capability of flying, say, certain aircraft, or like civil versus
Right.
commercial versus cargo or whatever, or big planes, small planes.
That's right. Every time someone adds a capability to their
It's interesting
credential.
because provided by Ms. Duckworth, again, incredible research. In fact, maybe we could divide some of the staff money to add it onto your pay for the work you've done on this one. But this even has license renewals here. And they're
That would
all
likely have been the medical. So pilots do renew their medical certificates.
inspector's endorsement, that's what it says, and the renewal. We don't have that there's no renewal.
We don't require renewal.
Okay. Just, again, and lost, do you have any information on lost or stolen credentials, Mr. Roth?
Again, the airports have an obligation when a SITA badge is reported lost or stolen, or that employee quits, leaves, to turn it off.
And they are required to notify TSA?
They're required to notify the airport, Mr. Chairman, and where then the airport's required to immediately deactivate the badge.
But do you get a notification on them?
We would not if it's a lost or stolen badge. Again, that would happen to the airport. Now, we do inspect, right? Because every airport, they have thresholds they can't exceed. So we went back and
Well, and
reviewed.
there's a law or regulation that says when 77% of the credentials are compromised, they have to reissue all new. Is that still?
Again, I can brief you specifically on what the requirements are, but it's lower than what you decided, Mr. Chairman. But we went back over a 5-year period, understanding this is an area where the majority of airports are really very compliant because the cost of non-compliance is steep. It's exceedingly expensive for them to rebadge their population. So we went back over 5 years, almost 450 airports, and we only had 23 instances of airports having to rebadge any part of their population. So again, this is really an area where the airports have a high level of compliance with respect to maintaining control of these lost and stolen badges.
So you're basically relying mostly on a driver's license for identification, right?
Well, I'm referring to SITA badges that are lost.
No, well, we'll say for a passenger, or for a pilot, because the pilot has an ID that doesn't have a picture and information.
No, but, Mr. Chairman, the pilots do have SITA badges.
Yeah,
Pilots are vetted through the airport system, just as all
but
employees are.
they're all different, as we've heard.
There are differences, and I think as Ms.
Yeah.
Carroll makes the case,
And-
that there's value in looking at how to perhaps refine that process. But I don't want to
And
leave
some
the
of this,
impression
too,
that
is,
pilots
and
aren't
I can't
vetted.
blame you all totally, because I've seen what happens. The airports lobby for keeping everything they're doing, and they don't want to change it. My God, you can't change it. The airlines are just as bad. Oh, no, they can't do this. You can't require that. There can't be standardization. They're just as bad. And then some of you are left in the lurch, so I'll give you that much credit. But we still have credentials, as I called it, in chaos. And somehow it's gotten us to this stage, but it's in spite. We've been very, very lucky and fortunate so far. I try to stay a little bit ahead of the curve. I think we need to have a sit-down with a new administrator again. He was good to come in at the beginning. I know he's trying to institute some changes and reforms, things that make sense. But I think there's some of these items that we need to go over. I think we probably should look at some of the results. Sometimes we do these hearings and nothing gets done. But what we might do, staff on both sides, make a list of some of these items, and then we have authorizers, Mr. From New York, Catco. He's an authorizer. He's also passed a couple of bills. Maybe we are not an authorizing committee. We're investigation and oversight. But if we just look at these and do nothing, not much comes as a positive result. So if we could, staff, let's put together, work with the minority, the things that we've uncovered here today that we could, And if you get a chance, we will sit down with the administrator and see where we could do more. FAA, we'll have another Groundhog Day in a couple of years, and we'll hear that they're on their way. But they also have some constraints, I know. And then the private sector has the solutions. Don't you have the solutions, Ms. Carroll?
Yes, sir, we do, and all we want to do is help in whatever way we can, give our,
You're doing both fingerprint and iris. You have that
yes, sir. Yes,
You have
sir.
readers for both.
We have readers for all,
Like
yes,
this-
sir. And we have the systems to overlay.
Take the staff, I think, when we were putting this together 15 years ago, I was at some of the European airports, and they had the finger and iris in operation. That's 15 years ago.
Well, sir, just a point of clarification. In the United States especially, fingerprints seems to be the default because they have to do criminal background checks and things like that. And so, most of our databases for criminal background checks are fingerprints. And so that seems to be, especially
again,
for workers.
For a passenger, like I have pre-check.
Perfect. Iris is a good solution for passengers because
and
it's
I think Clear might have. Does Clear have that?
I'm not
Iris.
sure. I'm not sure, yeah.
They may have, and we've looked at turning that over to the private sector, all of the people who could qualify for pre-check or credentialing, and then let TSA keep some of the rest of the mix. But again, we don't know who's getting on. We don't know where the credentials are. The credentials are lacking information. See if we got any final questions. And we will be submitting, as I said, some questions for you to respond to. One last question about, we rely quite a bit on a driver's license. The feds have set some real ID standards, I guess, and I guess there's still some states in non-compliance. Where are we with that, Mr. LaJoy?
Some of the initial enforcement of that will begin in 2018, and final enforcement will begin in 2020, Mr. Chairman.
I'm sorry?
At the point,
2000, give me the,
some of the initial enforcement of the Real ID compliant driver's licenses to gain access to the checkpoint will
Yeah.
begin in 2018, with the final enforcement beginning in 2020 on that.
so we're still 2 years out, but you're accepting the flawed IDs now.
Well, again, I mean, it's
Non-compliant. Yes, I mean, yes, you are.
well, again, we will start enforcement of that in 2 years. It gives time for states to.
We can pick out the states you should enforce it.
Fine. Illinois.
Illinois. And then final for Ms. Gilligan, when does FAA expect to establish a pilot records database?
We're working closely, actually, sir, with one of the representatives from the family groups from Colgan, who has a technical background.
This is way, way back.
The requirement for the pilot records database was in the FAA Extension and Safety Act of 2010. So
And
we're
what year is this?
2016. So we are working to establish, we have done a pilot program. We do understand what is required. The dilemma is that there are a number of kinds of records that airlines have kept over the years, including paper records and microfiche and all.
But you could set standards
Yes, sir,
for the
but we
records, have you?
set standards for
Yeah,
the
for
records.
what is required as
Oh,
far as keeping for a database.
Yes, we have informed the
And then
airlines.
it can be electronically transmitted.
We have informed the airlines of the records that they need to maintain in accordance with the statute, and that began in 2011 after the passage of the
But
statute.
we still don't have a
But
database.
we've not been able to establish the integrated database at this point.
Again, it's just very, 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 very frustrating. Anything else, Ms. Duckworth?
Not at this time, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, and I'll ask the staff to go through and see what questions we want to submit. We appreciate your response. For the record, we will leave the record open for, instead of 5 days, let's change it to 10 days, because we will submit a bunch of questions to them that have not been answered here. We appreciate your participation. Our intent is to try to do better, and we have a responsibility for oversight and making certain we move this process forward and keep us safe and secure. There being no further business before the subcommittee, this subcommittee hearing is adjourned. Boom.